Hello, this is the JMB Sports Talk channel, and today we're going to be discussing 5 situations where players should be higher on the top 100 NFL countdown list, and 5 cases where players were overrated and should be lower on the countdown list.
Yeah, so I'm gonna start it off, alternating, right? That's
Yes.
So we're gonna start off at number 5, Jalen Smith, ranked at 86 or 88 or whatever. Like either way, he should definitely be higher. He had a great season with the Cowboys. He anchored that Cowboys defense along with DeMarcus Lawrence and Leighton Vander Esch. He was a very, very good player, and I think he should be higher than 86 or 88.
Yes, I'm going to be doing players that should be lower on the list, and my first selection for that is J.J. Watt. Now, J.J. Watt has been struggling with injuries all year, right? And I understand that, this is, of course, based on maybe yearly. But I feel like it's sort of a hypocrisy on this list, because if you go by who's the best, then Lamar Jackson and Russell Wilson would not be above Mahomes. However, if you go by a yearly session, then J.J. Watt would not be this high, and Mahomes would probably still be higher than Russell Wilson. But I mean, regardless, J.J. Watt, according to that criteria, should not be on this list. Through 8 games, he only had 4 sacks. There was no game that he really came on in until the Buffalo Bills game. And even if you want to go by consistent success on a year-by-year basis and overall ability, he's been struggling with injuries for a long time, thus resulting in his inconsistent production. And therefore, I do not believe he belongs that high. I feel like the list sort of overrates him and sort of gives him a pass on his sort of lack of production and maybe injury issues and things that, yes, are out of his control, but mostly due to popularity. And if you look at the games he was in, they didn't quite reflect his overall ability. So I would personally put him at my number 5, or rather probably my most overrated player on the list overall.
All right. So at number 4 for guys that should have been higher, I have Earl Thomas. Yeah, Earl Thomas should have been a lot higher. Like the NFL degrades him, because of that situation where like a bunch of strippers were like in his hotel or something like that, and like his wife held him at gunpoint. But he was arguably one of the best, or a top 3 safety in the NFL. The numbers just back that whole thing up. I'm pretty sure he had like 4 interceptions, and he was probably the best player on the Ravens defense. So.
My next player is Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott had a career year statistically, in my opinion, not necessarily success-wise. He had a good year statistically, with a solid around 5,000 yards, about 30 touchdowns or so. However, that did not translate to success. His team only had an 8-8 year. And because of Dak Prescott's sort of production, but lack of overall proficiency at the position, his inaccuracy, his inability to get in touch with his receivers, even while having guys like Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper, Jason Witten, etc., Ezekiel Elliott out the backfield being used as sort of a backfield weapon, he still was not able to live up to his full potential. His team did not have nearly the same success it did early on in the season. He was struggling down the field, and there's a reason why his team, the Dallas Cowboys, are unwilling to give him a long-term contract that he wants them to live up to, because he's probably not a long-term option. He's probably reached his peak. He's not going to get any better physically. There are things he can work on, yes, but he's not the most gifted quarterback in the world. Not with his legs, not with his arms. Isn't the biggest guy. And when you got a guy like a Carson Wentz who didn't quite match his, overall prolific numbers and things like that, his team had more success. He was more efficient, and he had less help. His best receiver was probably Deshaun Jackson. His second best guy was probably J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, like Jeffrey was injured most of the season.
Yes. Yeah. Alshon Jeffrey also didn't perform very well when he was in. So, I mean, I just don't see him being that high. Yes, good production, but doesn't really reflect that well based on his team success.
I completely agree. At number 3, I have Darius Leonard. Now, like in 2018, the NFL, like the fans, they completely did him wrong. Well, it's the fans, but like, yeah, he had the most tackles in a rookie year, in like his rookie year, and out of like anyone in the NFL, he led the league in his rookie year. He didn't make the Pro Bowl. He did make the All Pro though. This year, it flip flopped. They saw how dominant he was. He made the Pro Bowl. He just didn't make an All Pro. He declined just a tiny bit, but just a tiny bit. He is still one of the best tacklers. He is consistent. He can he doesn't have any tackling problems. So, and he was overshadowed by a Colts team that lost Andrew Luck, and that was the focus was the quarterback position the entire season, and no one really just paid attention to the rest of the team. But Darius Leonard he's in my opinion a top 5 linebacker in the NFL. So.
Yes, very good player. One of the best players on one of the only real bright spots to that team, which was that front 7 of the Indianapolis Colts, which was giving guys a lot of issues, hence their matchup with the Chiefs early on in the season. My next guy is going to be Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry was selected onto the Cleveland Browns offense to pair along with Odell Beckham Jr. He's been there for, I think, the last couple of years, but overall he's been sort of a guy, meant to be sort of a middle-of-the-field threat. And he produced solidly. I think he had about 1.1 thousand yards, but he was inconsistent early on in the season. He was dropping passes. His speed was not quite up to touch. And, I mean, look, these lists, I guess, mainly are based on year-by-year success. If you look at this year, his success didn't translate to his team's success, and part of the reason was because Freddie Kitchens put him in a bad spot. I don't think it necessarily reflects his overall ability, but if you look at the Freddie Kitchens system, he was trying to get Baker Mayfield and Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. to run a sort of vertical system, and they just overall weren't as successful. Jarvis Landry didn't have a ton of yards per catch. He wasn't really a threat down the field. He wasn't quite as successful as he was with the Dolphins. He wasn't getting as many receptions, and he wasn't able to live up to the potential that he could have had, even with Odell's lack of success. And I just don't think he was serving his quarterback as well as he could have.
I completely agree. Like, Jarvis Landry is known for being a deep threat, a speedy deep threat receiver, but the yards per catch just didn't reflect that. Like, Kitchens, he's a bad head coach. He wasn't fit for the head coaching role. Okay. Moving on, at number 2, if you haven't seen the top 100, this is going to shock you. Darren Waller, tight end for the Las Vegas Raiders, formerly the Oakland Raiders, at 99. He is at 99. He made the Pro Bowl. He was an incredible tight end with just a mediocre quarterback. Like, he made Derek Carr look like decent. Like, Derek Carr has had a couple good years in the past, but like this year it wasn't that good of a year. But Darren Waller, he was a beast. They didn't have much of an offensive line aside from Trent Brown and Rodney Hudson. Okay, that is a pretty good O-line, but yeah, Darren Waller, he was very, very good.
Yeah, he was one of the only real bright spots on that Raiders team, so I do agree with that. My next choice is going to be DeAndre Hopkins. Now, the Texans are sort of a one-man wide receiving core. DeAndre Hopkins is their guy. I think he's ranked around 18.
8, actually.
Yeah, number 8. Yeah, number 8.
Yeah, like 18 would be like fine.
Yeah, I think that would be a decent spot for him. But overall, if you look at his numbers, they went down. He wasn't quite as consistent throughout the year. He had some issues with drops in the Saints game, although he did have some good moments. But his production overall dropped. His yards per catch dropped by 2. Okay. His receptions dropped by 9, and his yardage dropped by 400. He did not have quite the success of a lot of the top contemporaries around him. I mean, You look at Michael Thomas. You look at Julio Jones, who was ranked much lower than he was, although Julio Jones had a better year. Hopkins only had 7 or so touchdowns this year. Not quite the same as in previous years, and he only missed 1 game. And the Houston Texans also didn't really have to rely on him as much. They had a running game. They had Carlos Hyde. Watson ran for about 400 yards. And, also Will Fuller had 600 yards. He started to come into his own. And they didn't really have to rely on him as much as they have in previous years. And his production overall just kind of dropped. I don't think number 8 necessarily suits him for this year.
Yeah. I think that, now that he's in the air raid offense, he'll do a lot better with the Cardinals. So, yeah. Number 1 for most, least, whatever, the lowest that should have been higher. Okay, I can't really talk. So, number 1, we have Tre'Davious White at 47. Keep in mind, he was a first-team All-Pro, made the Pro Bowl. He also is below Dak Prescott. He's below Dak Prescott. And he is arguably the second-best cornerback in the NFL. Tre'Davious White, he had 5 interceptions last year. He locked guys down. If you want to look at the best division, for cornerbacks, it's obviously the AFC East because they have the 2 best cornerbacks in the NFL, in Gilmore and Tre'Davious White. And Tre'Davious White has proved that he is a lockdown cornerback, and he will be for many years to come. And I think 47 is way too low for Tre'Davious White.
Yeah, so my last guy in this case is going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo, I feel like in this list, is a product of overvaluing the quarterback position, similarly to Dak Prescott. Jimmy Garoppolo did have a career year. He had 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. But it was mostly a product of him being able to rely on Kyle Shanahan's great play calling, and the team was tailor-made around the running game. The running game was the one that was anchoring the offense, and Jimmy Garoppolo played sort of second fiddle. The passing game played second fiddle, and he was not a running threat at all during the season. Loud plain. Also, if you look at his Super Bowl performance, he didn't perform that well. He had a good first half, was able to get some good passes off, but choked the game when it mattered most. Was decent throughout the year, but mainly if you look at the best performances from the Niners, it came from the running backs. It came from Mostert. It came from Tevin Coleman. And the offensive line. He's not the first guy you would look to in terms of who is performing for the 49ers. And if that's not the position you're taking as far as the role you take on your team, I don't know why you should be a top 50 player.
I completely agree. Sorry, this thing is just getting in the way. But I completely agree with that, Jackson. I think Garoppolo, like Tom Brady, is a system quarterback. I think,
Well, at this point, I think Tom Brady in his prime could have succeeded anywhere. But at this point, Jimmy,
just for
his age,
they're both system quarterbacks. But I do think Garoppolo had a decent season, but in the Super Bowl, he just couldn't pull it off. Part of that wasn't his fault, but part of that also was his fault.
Yeah, and when they trounced the Green Bay Packers by a score of 37 to 20.
Yeah.
I don't even want to remind myself of that, but he only attempted 8 passes. They just handed the ball off to Raheem Mostert, and he didn't play a very key role in that game. And for a team that has relatively inconsistent passing defense in the Packers, you'd probably expect for him to have more success, but like I said, the run game is the focal point of the team, and for him to be rated as a top 7 or so quarterback and above Carson Wentz as well, I don't understand it.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. But that is going to do it for the 5 worst spots, higher and lower. thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for more content.
Have a good one,
have a good
fellas.
one, fellas.
Smash that like button. But if you don't like the video, smash the dislike button. Everything is appreciated. Any view.
Yeah.
Peace.
Peace.